Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. With your hosts, Drew and Daniella. Take our hands and let's walk this journey together.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Meaningful Hearts podcast. Today, it's just me. And today, I want to talk about driving. Now, this episode is inspired by a recent realization that I had in my own life and something that I'm working on. And I thought it'd be a good idea to share it with you all. It's nothing super heavy. It's actually on the lighter side. But it's something that is helping me ultimately work my way into building a more meaningful life. So I thought to share it with you all. So the question is, how do you drive? Normally, if somebody were to ask me, how do I drive? I would say something like, with my hands on the wheel, duh. Pretty sarcastic and witty. That's the kind of person I am. But that is the question. And not just from a literal standpoint. Yes, you use your feet and your hands to drive. But I also think that you use more than that, or you can learn to, like I am learning to use more than just my hands and my feet. It can become a sensory experience, and it can be a really good way to practice mindfulness and being present. So the way that I came to this realization is I was on the highway coming home from work one day, and I usually drive with just one hand on the wheel. It's usually my left hand. And what they teach you in either driver's ed or if you go to like a driver's school, it's both hands on the wheel, 10 and 2. Most people don't drive like that. Most people you drive with one hand. I drive on the left hand. I drive using my left hand. Sorry. So I was on the highway and I was deep in thought, and I don't remember specifically what I was deep in thought about, but then I looked at the steering wheel and I realized, wow, my hand is a little, not white, but it's losing its color a little bit. And it was in that moment that I realized I was gripping the steering wheel really tight. Obviously, because I was only using one hand, I think it requires more to hold on to the wheel. And I guess it was in this moment that I started to think about other things that I also do while I drive. So not only do I use my left hand and I find myself gripping the steering wheel pretty tight, but because I'm using my left hand, I'm actually also leaning more towards my left side. And then I started to notice how uncomfortable actually that is. And this kind of further inspired some other questions of how am I on the road? What am I thinking about that I'm not fully here? Where does my mind go? And I guess ultimately that's the inspiration for this episode. Because now what I'm starting to do is I don't always follow the 10 and 2, but I try to. And the reason why that is because it honestly helps me be lighter with my hands on the wheel. I don't have to grip it as tight. It helps me feel what the wheel feels like under my hands. And it's also helped me correct my posture a little bit because now I'm not leaning so much towards the left. Now I'm more aware of it. So I'm able to sit straight. Helps my posture. My hands on the wheel feels better. And I think that this is something so small, but it can ultimately make such a big difference because the little things that we do in life make such a big difference. And then another layer to that is, where is your head when you're driving? Where's your headspace? Or I drive in silence a lot. I use the time to either reflect or decompress or just think about my life. Sometimes I'll listen to a podcast. I rarely listen to music. But I encourage you all to think about what you listen to, or where is your headspace when you're driving? Are you able to drive in silence? And if you aren't, what's coming up for you that you're not able to? If you listen to a podcast, what's going through your mind? Do you ever find yourself rewinding and going back because you were lost in thought? It's pretty interesting where our mind can go when we're just doing something that we're so used to. I don't know if this has happened to anybody listening, but it's definitely happened to me. There have been times in my life where I find myself getting to my destination and not even remembering how I got there. I was probably on autopilot. Some things are just very natural. And so now what I've been working on is being more present while I'm driving and asking myself, well, how does this feel right now? How does my car feel right now? What's going on the road? There are times where I've listened to mindful driving videos on YouTube, and that really helps to set the tone for how I feel throughout the day. There's one particular mindful driving video that incorporates the sensory experience of feeling, like I mentioned earlier, feeling the wheel under your hands, your seat under your butt, how it feels to speed up and slow down, the cars around you, the sounds around you. It really incorporates a sensory experience, and I honestly think it's very helpful. I find myself calmer. If you're the type of person who has road rage, or who's an aggressive driver, or who gets frustrated very easily, this is especially for you. Because the reality is that we have a hard time being present, at least most of us. And so what better way to incorporate mindfulness and living in the present than while you're driving somewhere? Because it's something that you actually have to do. That's how you get to from point A to point B. At least I'm speaking from a general standpoint. I know that some people don't know how to drive. Other people don't necessarily need to learn how to drive if they live in a crowded city. They just take subway or MTA or public transportation. But this is what I think about. And I know it's a lot of questions, but the idea is to pose questions to help build a more meaningful life. And this is what I've been working on. So I encourage you to think about all of this. And I think that's a good point to just leave you guys with. Bit of a shorter episode, which I think sometimes short, sweet, and simple is a good way to go. Thank you all for listening. And I hope you think of this episode the next time that you're driving.